At a roadside diner outside Millbrook, Montana, a 16-year-old named Rowan Ashford sat trembling in a booth, watching the parking lot through rain-streaked glass. His stepdad's truck would arrive any minute. The custody hearing was tomorrow, and Rowan knew what waited for him if the judge sided with the man who'd made his life a nightmare for 3 years. Outside, 23 motorcycles pulled into the lot, leather vests soaked dark, engines rumbling low like distant thunder. The leader, a grizzled veteran named Cade Hollis, stepped inside to order coffee. He noticed the kid, the bruises, the fear. When Rowan's stepdad arrived, loud, aggressive, grabbing the boy's wrist, Cade didn't hesitate. He walked over, placed a scarred hand on the table, and said 6 words that changed everything. "Son, do you need help leaving?" What followed became a viral story that spread across news outlets and social media. A convoy of bikers who escorted a terrified teenager to court stood as character witnesses and exposed a system that had failed him. But beneath the headlines was something deeper, a promise made in a diner at midnight, between a man who'd lost his own son and a boy who'd lost hope. This is the story of how a single moment of courage united strangers into a chosen family, and how justice, when paired with loyalty, can change the world. The rain hit the windows of Sally's diner like buckshot, steady and relentless. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and grease from the fryer. It was past midnight, and the only customers were long-haul truckers nursing lukewarm cups and a kid hunched in the corner booth, staring at nothing. If you're watching this from somewhere far away, leave a comment below. Tell us where you are and what time it is where this story reaches you. We want to know how far these words travel. Rowan Ashford was 16, but he looked younger, thin frame, oversized hoodie pulled tight, and a backpack clutched against his chest like a shield. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Texts he didn't answer. Outside, headlights swept across the lot, and Rowan flinched each time, checking to see if it was the truck. Cade Hollis sat at the counter, peeling off his wet riding gloves. He was 52, broad-shouldered, with silver streaking through his beard and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. The patch on his vest read, "Iron Creed MC, Founder." Behind him, through the glass, 22 more bikes sat gleaming under the neon glow of the diner sign. They'd been riding back from a memorial service for one of their brothers, a veteran who'd survived 2 wars but couldn't survive coming home. The ride had been long, cold, and silent. Cade ordered coffee and turned to scan the room the way he always did. Old habit, always aware. That's when he saw the kid. Rowan was trembling. Not from cold. The diner was warm. This was something else. Cade noticed the way his eyes kept darting to the door, the way his shoulders stayed rigid, ready to bolt. Cade had seen that look before, on his own son's face years ago, before the overdose that took him. The door swung open and a man stepped inside, mid-40s, heavy boots, flannel shirt stretched tight over a beer gut. He scanned the room with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. When he spotted Rowan, his expression darkened. "There you are," the man said, voice too loud for the quiet space. "Get up. We're leaving." Rowan didn't move. "I said get up." The man crossed the diner in 4 strides, grabbed Rowan's wrist and yanked. The kid yelped, a sound that cut through the low hum of conversation and made every head turn. Cade was off his stool before he realized he'd moved. "Hey," his voice was calm, but it carried weight. "Let the kid go. The man turned, still gripping Rowan's wrist. "This is family business. Stay out of it." Cade stepped closer, slow and deliberate. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "I'll ask once more. Let him go." For a moment, the man hesitated. Then he released Rowan's wrist and took a step back, chest puffed out, trying to reclaim control. "You got no idea what you're stepping into, old man." Cade ignored him. He looked at Rowan, who was rubbing his wrist, eyes wide and wet. "Son," Cade said quietly, "do you need help leaving?" Rowan's lips trembled. He nodded. Cade turned back to the man. "He's staying with me tonight. You got a problem with that, we can call the sheriff." The man sneered. "Doesn't matter. Custody hearings tomorrow. Judge already sided with me once. Kid's coming home where he belongs." We'll see about that." Outside, the other bikers had noticed the commotion. One by one, they climbed off their bikes and moved toward the diner entrance, silent, unified, a wall of leather and steel. The man glanced at them, then back at Cade. "This ain't over," he muttered, then turned and walked out. Rowan exhaled, a shaky breath that sounded like it had been held for hours. Cade sat down across from him, slid the coffee cup toward the kid. "Drink, then you're going to tell me everything." And Rowan did. Rowan's hands shook as he wrapped them around the coffee cup. It was too hot to drink, but he held it anyway, letting the heat ground him. Across the booth, Cade Hollis sat still, listening. Outside, the bikers lingered near their machines, silent sentinels in the rain. "His name's Dale Merrick," Rowan began, voice barely above a whisper. "He married my mom 4 years ago. She died last year. Cancer." Cade nodded. He didn't interrupt. "Before she passed, she told me to call my aunt if things got bad. Aunt Iris. She lives in Oregon. She wanted me to go live with her, but Dale... He filed for custody, said I was his responsibility now." The judge agreed. "Why'd the judge side with him?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "Dale's good at pretending. In court he was all smiles, talked about stability, family, how much he cared. But at home..." He trailed off, pulled his sleeve down over a fading bruise on his forearm. Cade's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and final. "How long's this been going on?" "Or since Mom got sick, maybe longer, I don't know. She tried to protect me, but after she was gone..." Rowan's voice cracked. "There's a hearing tomorrow. My aunt's coming, but Dale's lawyer already got the first ruling. If the judge sides with him again, I'm going back. Not if I can help it." Rowan looked up, surprised. "You don't even know me." "Doesn't matter." Cade leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I had a son once, lost him 6 years ago. He was 19, smart kid, good heart. But the world got too heavy, and I wasn't there when he needed me." His voice was steady, but pain flickered beneath the surface. "I can't change that, but I can be here now." Rowan blinked and tears spilled over. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow, you're not walking into that courtroom alone. Every man outside, all 23 of us, will be there. We'll testify if the judge lets us. And if he doesn't, we'll stand in that hallway until the whole damn system hears us." "Why would you do that?" Cade's scarred hand reached across the table, tapped once on the wood. "Because promises matter. Your mom made you promise to survive. I'm making you a promise right now. You're not going back to that house." Rowan's breath hitched. For the first time in months, something other than fear flickered in his chest. Hope. The sun hadn't risen yet when Cade made the call. He stood outside the diner, phone pressed to his ear, while Rowan slept in the back booth wrapped in someone's spare riding jacket. Around him, the other bikers gathered, men and women who'd ridden through storms, buried friends, and rebuilt their lives from nothing. "Mac," Cade said when the line connected, "I need a favor." McBrennan had been a lawyer before he'd traded his suit for leather. He still kept his license, just in case. "Talk to me," Cade explained. "The kid, the stepdad. The hearing scheduled for 9 a.m. at Millbrook County Courthouse." "You want me to represent him?" Mac asked. "I want you to make sure the judge hears the truth." There was a pause. Then, "I'll be there in 2 hours. Send me everything you've got." Cade hung up and turned to face his crew. "Hearing's at 9. We ride at 7. Full colors. No weapons, no attitude. We're there to stand witness, nothing more." A woman named Vex, her arms covered in ink, spoke up. "What if the stepdad shows up with friends? Then we stand taller." By dawn, 23 motorcycles rolled out of the diner parking lot in formation. Rowan sat behind Cade, arms wrapped tight around the man's waist, feeling the rumble of the engine through his entire body. The sky was the color of bruised steel, and the road stretched out ahead like a promise. When they arrived at the courthouse, a small crowd had already gathered. Word had spread. Social media, local news, the way stories like this always do. Someone had filmed the scene at the diner. It was already going viral. Rowan climbed off the bike, legs shaky. Cade placed a hand on his shoulder. "You ready?" "I don't know." "That's okay, we got you." Inside the courthouse, Dale Merrick stood with his lawyer, a slick man in a grey suit. When he saw the bikers filing in, leather vests, patches, boots, his face went pale. The bailiff looked nervous. Gentlemen, this is a closed hearing." McBrennan stepped forward, flashing his bar card. "I'm representing the minor, Rowan Ashford. These men are character witnesses." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Winslow, entered and paused at the sight of the packed courtroom. She adjusted her glasses, looked at Cade, then at Rowan. "This is highly irregular," she said. "With respect, Your Honor," Mac replied. "So is a child begging strangers for protection because the system failed him." Judge Winslow's expression didn't change, but she sat down. "Proceed. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you." The courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. Rowan sat beside McBrennan at the defendant's table, hands clasped tight in his lap. Behind him, the bikers filled 3 rows, silent, unmoving, a wall of presence that seemed to fill the entire space. Cade sat directly behind Rowan, close enough that the kid could hear his steady breathing. Across the aisle, Dale Merrick sat with his lawyer, a man named Pritchard, who looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate catalogue. Dale's expression was carefully neutral, but his jaw kept clenching, a telltale sign of nerves. Judge Winslow reviewed the case file, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Pritchard, your client has petitioned for continued custody of the minor, Rowan Ashford. The previous ruling granted temporary custody pending this hearing. Present your case." Pritchard stood, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, Mr. Merrick has provided a stable home for Rowan since the tragic passing of his mother. He has maintained employment, kept the boy enrolled in school, and fulfilled every legal obligation of guardianship." Mac stood. Objection. Stable is a generous term for a household where the minor sustained repeated injuries documented by the school nurse. Pritchard's smile didn't falter. Teenage boys get into scrapes, Your Honor. It's hardly evidence of... It's evidence, Mac interrupted, when the injuries align with a pattern of escalating control and intimidation. Judge Winslow held up a hand. I'll hear testimony. Mr. Brennan, call your first witness. Mac gestured to Rowan. The minor himself, Your Honor. Rowan's heart hammered as he walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore him in, and he sat, gripping the armrests. His voice came out small at first. I don't want to go back. Speak up, please, Judge Winslow said, not unkindly. Rowan swallowed. I don't want to go back to Dale's house. Why not? Because he hurts me. The words came faster now, tumbling out. Not where people can see, he's smart about it, shoves me into walls, locks me in the basement when I disrespect him, throws things. Rowan's voice broke. Once he held my head underwater in the sink, said it was to teach me a lesson. The courtroom went dead silent. Dale shot to his feet. That's a lie. Mr. Merrick, sit down, Judge Winslow said sharply. He's lying. He's been coached by these thugs. Cade stood, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Call me a thug again and see what happens. The bailiff moved toward Cade, but Judge Winslow raised her hand. Everyone sit, now. Slowly, the room settled. Cade lowered himself back into his seat, but his eyes never left Dale. Judge Winslow turned to Rowan. Do you have proof of these allegations? Rowan shook his head. I was too scared to tell anyone. I thought if I just survived until I turned 18. Mac stepped forward. Your Honor, I have statements from the school nurse, a teacher who noted behavioral changes, and a neighbor who reported hearing shouting from the residents on multiple occasions. Pritchard scoffed. Hearsay, Your Honor. It's corroboration, Mac countered, and it's enough to warrant investigation. Judge Winslow leaned back, studying Rowan. Young man, where do you want to go, if not with Mr. Merrick? My Aunt Iris. She lives in Oregon. She wanted me to come after Mom died. But Dale fought it. And these men... Judge Winslow gestured to the bikers. How do they factor into this? Rowan looked back at Cade. They're the first people who listened. Judge Winslow called a recess. Rowan stepped down from the witness stand, legs weak, and Mac guided him back to the table. Outside in the hallway, the bikers waited, a quiet, immovable force. Cade stepped out to check on the kid. You did good in there, he said. Rowan leaned against the wall, eyes closed. I thought I'd be braver. I thought I wouldn't cry. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about telling the truth when everything in you wants to run. Cade paused. Your mom would be proud. Rowan's eyes snapped open, wet and red. You didn't know her. No. But I know what it takes to raise a kid who fights back when the world tries to break him. She did that, and you're still here. Behind them, Vex approached with a bottle of water. She handed it to Rowan without a word, just a nod. One by one, the other bikers did the same, small gestures of solidarity, a hand on his shoulder. A quiet, hang in there, kid. A woman named Faye, who'd lost her own daughter years ago, squeezed his hand and said, We're not leaving. When they filed back into the courtroom, Judge Winslow had a different energy. She looked at Dale, then at Rowan, then at Cade. Mr. Hollis, she said, approach the bench. Cade stood and walked forward. Up close, Judge Winslow's eyes were sharp, calculating. What's your interest in this case? I made a promise, Cade said simply. To whom? To the kid, to myself, to the son I couldn't save. Judge Winslow studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Sit down. She turned to Dale. Mr. Merrick, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into the allegations raised today. Until that investigation concludes, custody is suspended. Rowan Ashford will be placed with his maternal aunt, pending final determination. Dale's face turned crimson. You can't do this. He's lying. Those bikers put him up to... One more word, Judge Winslow said coldly, and I'll hold you in contempt. Dale's lawyer pulled him back into his seat. Judge Winslow looked at Rowan. Son, you're going to Oregon. Pack your things. The court will arrange transport. Rowan's breath left him in a rush. He turned to look at Cade, eyes wide with disbelief. Cade gave a single nod. Outside the courthouse, news cameras had gathered. Someone had live-streamed the hearing. The story was already spreading. Bikers defend abused teen in viral court stand. Rowan stood on the steps, surrounded by the crew. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt safe. By the time Rowan and the bikers stepped out of the courthouse, the parking lot was packed. News vans, cameras, reporters with microphones, all clamoring for a statement. The story had exploded online. Clips from the hearing, shaky phone footage from outside the diner, and interviews with locals had turned this into a national conversation. A reporter pushed forward. Mr. Hollis, what made you decide to get involved? Cade paused, adjusted the collar of his vest. Wasn't a decision. It was the right thing to do. Are you worried about backlash? Some people are calling this vigilante justice. Justice is what happened in that courtroom. We just made sure it was heard. Another reporter turned to Rowan. How do you feel about what these men did for you? Rowan's voice was steadier now. They saved my life. The footage went viral within hours. Social media exploded with support. Stand with Rowan trended. Fundraisers started for legal fees and Rowan's relocation to Oregon. The Iron Creed MC's page gained tens of thousands of followers overnight, but not everyone was pleased. Late that evening, as Rowan packed his things at a motel under Cade's supervision, his phone buzzed. A message from Dale. You think this is over? You destroyed my life. I'll make sure you regret it. Rowan showed it to Cade, hands trembling. Cade read it, jaw tight, then deleted it. Block him. He's got no power over you anymore. What if he comes after me? He won't, because if he does, he'll have to go through all of us, and that's not a fight he'll win. Rowan nodded, but the fear lingered. Trauma didn't vanish just because a judge ruled in your favor. Cade understood that. He'd lived it. That night, the crew set up a rotation. 2 bikers stayed outside the motel at all times. Rowan slept fitfully, waking every few hours to check the locks. But each time through the curtains, he could see the silhouettes, leather-clad sentinels standing guard. The next morning, Aunt Iris arrived. She was in her early 50s, with graying hair pulled into a bun and eyes that looked like Rowan's mom. When she saw Rowan, she pulled him into a hug that lasted a full minute. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have fought harder. It's okay, Rowan said, though his voice cracked. I'm okay now. Iris turned to Cade. Thank you. I don't know how to... You don't need to thank me. Just take care of him. Before they left, Rowan asked Cade if he could say goodbye to the crew. They gathered in the motel parking lot, all 23 of them, and Rowan stood there trying to find words big enough to match what they'd done. Finally, he just said, I'll never forget this. Vex grinned. You better not. And when you turn 18, you know where to find us. Rowan smiled, the first real smile he'd worn in years. If this story moved you, leave a like below. It helps more people find these stories of courage and chosen family. The drive from Montana to Oregon took 2 days, but for Rowan Ashford, it felt like crossing into another lifetime. Aunt Iris drove a sensible sedan that smelled like lavender sachets and old paperbacks, comforting scents that reminded him of his mother's bedroom before the illness took over. Rowan sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape shift from endless plains to dense forests, from wheat fields to mountain passes dusted with early snow. His phone buzzed constantly those first few hours. Messages from the crew flooded in, photos of the open road, jokes about Mac's terrible coffee habit, check-ins disguised as casual banter. Vex sent a meme about courtroom drama. Faye sent a heart emoji and the words, "We're proud of you." And Cade, in his typical understated way, texted just 4 words, "You good kid." Rowan typed back, "Yeah, thank you." The reply came immediately, "Anytime." They stopped at a roadside diner in Idaho for lunch, the kind with vinyl booths and laminated menus sticky from decades of use. Iris ordered vegetable soup and herbal tea. Rowan stared at the burger on his plate, picking at the fries but barely eating. His stomach was still tied in knots, not from fear of Dale anymore, but from the unfamiliarity of safety. He kept glancing toward the entrance, an old habit that refused to die, waiting for someone to burst through the door, waiting for the yelling to start. "Rowan," Iris said gently, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her fingers were warm, her touch careful. "You're safe now. Dale can't hurt you anymore." "I know." His voice was quiet, uncertain. "It just doesn't feel real yet." "It will. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process, like learning to walk again after an injury. But you'll get there, and I'll be with you every step." Rowan met her eyes. His mother's eyes, the same shade of hazel flecked with gold, and nodded. He wanted to believe her. He was trying. They arrived in Eugene, Oregon, late on a Sunday evening, just as the streetlights flickered on. Iris's house sat on a quiet block, lined with maple trees, their leaves turning brilliant shades of red and orange. The house itself was small but inviting. Pale yellow siding, a porch with a hanging swing, flower boxes under every window. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. Inside, the wooden floors creaked underfoot. Bookshelves lined every wall, overflowing with novels and poetry collections and old photo albums. The air smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. A grey tabby cat named Moby appeared from the kitchen, meowed once, and rubbed against Rowan's leg. "This is your room," Iris said, leading him down the hallway. She opened the door to a small bedroom at the back of the house. "It was your mom's when she was your age. I've kept it mostly the same. Thought you might like that." Rowan stepped inside and stopped. The walls were painted pale blue, the color of a clear morning sky. A wooden desk sat beneath the window, cluttered with old pencils and a lamp shaped like an owl. But what made his breath catch were the photographs pinned to a corkboard above the desk. Dozens of them, all of his mom as a teenager. His mom smiling at the camera, his mom laughing with friends, his mom at 16, 17, 18, alive, vibrant, untouched by illness or grief. Rowan set his backpack on the bed and stood there staring at the photos. His throat tightened, his eyes burned. "Take your time," Iris said softly from the doorway. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me." That night, Rowan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. No shouting, no slamming doors, no footsteps in the hallway that made his pulse spike. Just the hum of the heater and the distant sound of Moby purring somewhere in the darkness. And in that quiet, Rowan finally let himself cry. Not from fear this time, but from relief, from grief, from the overwhelming weight of finally being able to stop running. Weeks passed slowly, then faster. Rowan enrolled at Eugene High School. He joined a support group for teens dealing with trauma, sitting in a circle of strangers who understood what it felt like to carry invisible scars. He started therapy with a woman named Dr. Keller, who didn't push him to talk faster than he was ready. The nightmares came less frequently. He learned to sleep through the night without waking every 2 hours to check the locks. But he didn't forget. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, he called Cade. They'd talk about nothing important: the weather, school, what the crew was up to, whether Mac had finally learned to make decent coffee. Cade never pushed him to talk about the hard stuff. He just listened, and that was enough. One Saturday in late October, 6 months after the courthouse stand, Cade called with news. His voice was steady, but there was satisfaction beneath it. The investigation wrapped up. Dale's being charged with child endangerment and assault. Won't do serious time, probably probation and mandatory counseling, but he's on record now. If he ever tries this again with another kid, they'll have proof. Rowan exhaled slowly, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Good. How you holding up out there? Better. Some days are harder than others, but Iris is amazing. School's okay. I'm learning to play guitar. He paused. I'm okay, Cade, really. There was a smile in Cade's voice when he replied. Your mum chose well when she trusted Iris. Yeah, Rowan said quietly. She did. Before they hung up, Cade said something he'd been holding on to for weeks. You know, kid, you've got a standing invitation. Anytime you want to ride out this way, there's a place for you. Not as a member, you're too young for that, but as family, we'll teach you to ride. Show you what it means to have the road ahead of you. Rowan's voice went thick with emotion. I'd like that. Good, then we'll make it happen. 6 months after the courthouse stand, on a quiet Sunday morning in March, Rowan sat at his mum's old desk and wrote a letter. Not to Dale, not to the judge, not even to his therapist, but to Cade Hollis and every member of the Iron Creed MC who had stood beside him when he had no one else. He'd been thinking about it for weeks, trying to find the right words. How do you thank someone for saving your life? How do you express gratitude big enough to match the gift of survival? Finally, he stopped overthinking and just wrote from the heart. The letter poured out of him, raw, honest, unfiltered. When he finished, he read it twice, made a few small edits, then grabbed his phone. He took a photo of himself standing beside a printout of the now famous image of Cade's bike from that night at the diner. Then he posted the letter to social media, along with the photo, tagging every news outlet that had covered the story. The letter read, 6 months ago, I was a terrified 16-year-old kid sitting alone in a diner outside Millbrook, Montana, watching the parking lot and waiting for my stepdad to drag me back to a house where I didn't feel safe. I didn't know if anyone would listen. I didn't know if anyone cared. I was ready to give up, but then Cade Hollis walked into that diner, and when my stepdad grabbed me, Cade didn't look away. He didn't tell himself it wasn't his problem. He asked me 6 words that changed my life. Son, do you need help leaving? The next day, 23 members of the Iron Creed MC rode with me to court. They stood in that hallway. They testified. They made the system listen. And because of them, I'm alive, I'm safe, I'm healing. I've learned what it means to keep a promise. I've learned what it means to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. And I've learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand beside you when no one else will. Cade and the crew didn't have to care. They could have finished their coffee and kept riding, but they chose to help a stranger. They chose me, and that choice saved my life. I'm in Oregon now, living with my aunt. I'm back in school. I'm in therapy. I'm learning to play guitar. I'm learning to sleep without checking the locks. I'm learning what it feels like to be safe. And I owe all of that to people who didn't have to care, but chose to anyway. So thank you, Cade. Thank you, Vex, Mac, Faye, and every single member of Iron Creed. Thank you for showing me that courage looks like standing up when the world asks you to sit down. Thank you for teaching me that promises matter. Thank you for being the family I needed when I had no one else. Thank you will never be enough, but it's all I have. Rowan Ashford. Within an hour, the post had 1,000 shares. Within 3 hours, 10,000. By the end of the day, it had gone viral. Again, major news outlets picked it up. Morning shows requested interviews. Podcasts reached out. The story exploded across every platform. But more importantly, the messages started pouring in. Not just from supporters, but from other kids. Teenagers trapped in abusive homes, parents who didn't know how to help their children, teachers who saw the signs but didn't know what to do, foster youth aging out of the system with nowhere to go. The messages came by the hundreds, then thousands. One message stood out. It was from a 14-year-old girl in Texas. "I'm in the same situation you were. Can you help me?" Rowan forwarded it to Cade. Cade called him within minutes. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" "Yeah. We need to do something about this kid. This isn't just about you anymore. This is bigger." And that's how the Rowan Initiative was born. Cade and Mac partnered with legal advocates, social workers, and therapists to create a foundation dedicated to helping at-risk youth escape abusive situations. They set up hotlines. They connected kids with pro bono lawyers. They rode to courthouses across the country, standing as witnesses for children who had no one else. The Iron Creed MC became known not just as bikers, but as protectors. Within a year, they'd helped 47 kids get out of dangerous homes. Within 2 years, that number reached over 200, and Rowan, once he turned 18, became the Foundation's youngest advocate, speaking at events, helping other teens navigate the system, living proof that survival was possible. 1 year after posting the letter, Rowan stood on stage at a charity gala for the Rowan Initiative in Portland. Behind him, projected on a massive screen 30 feet wide, was the now iconic photo of the bikers standing outside the Millbrook courthouse. Leather vests, arms crossed, an unmovable wall of solidarity. The ballroom was packed with donors, survivors, advocates, and journalists. The silence was absolute. Rowan gripped the microphone, took a breath, and began. "I used to think courage meant not being afraid. I thought it meant being strong enough to handle everything on your own. But I've learned something different. Courage means being terrified and choosing to act anyway. It means asking for help when you need it. It means standing up when the world tells you to sit down. And it means showing up for people who can't show up for themselves." He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Some were crying. Others nodded. "Thank you to everyone here tonight who believes in this work. And thank you to the family I chose. the one that chose me back. Because of you, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living." The applause was deafening. It lasted nearly 2 minutes. Afterward, a dozen kids approached him, survivors just like him, each one wanting to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell their own stories. And Rowan listened to every single one. 3 years after the courthouse stand that changed everything, Rowan Ashford graduated from Eugene High School with honors. He stood backstage in his cap and gown, hands shaking slightly as he waited for his name to be called. Around him, his classmates laughed and took selfies, but Rowan's mind was somewhere else. He was thinking about how far he'd come, about the kid he used to be, terrified, broken, convinced he'd never make it to 18. And now here he was, alive, graduating, moving forward. When he peeked through the curtains at the auditorium, he spotted Aunt Iris in the 3rd row, already crying happy tears and clutching a bouquet of sunflowers. Beside her sat Cade Hollis, Vex, Mac, Faye, and 11 other members of the Iron Creed MC, all wearing their leather vests under borrowed sport coats to comply with the school's dress code. They looked hilariously out of place among the suburban parents in their pastel blazers and sundresses. But they didn't care. They were there for Rowan. That's all that mattered. "Rowan Ashford," the principal's voice echoed through the speakers. Rowan walked across the stage, legs steady this time. No trembling, no fear. When he accepted his diploma, the applause was polite, except for one section. The Iron Creed crew stood, boots pounding on the floor, and cheered loud enough to shake the rafters. A few teachers frowned, most of the parents smiled, and Rowan, standing center stage under the hot lights, found Cade's face in the crowd and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Cade nodded once, slow and deliberate. A promise kept. After the ceremony, they gathered in the parking lot, while other families dispersed to restaurants and celebration dinners. Rowan had something to show them. He pulled up the sleeve of his gown, revealing a fresh tattoo on his forearm, a compass rose rendered in black ink, with the words "Chosen Family" inscribed beneath it in elegant script. "Got it yesterday," Rowan said, grinning at their reactions. "Figured it was time to make it permanent." Vex laughed, punching his shoulder gently. "Kid's officially one of us now." Mac raised an eyebrow. "You know that means you're stuck with us forever, right?" "I'm counting on it." Faye pulled him into a hug that smelled like leather and jasmine perfume. "Your mom would be so proud, sweetheart." Rowan's eyes stung, but he didn't look away. "I hope so." That evening, as the sun began its descent toward the Pacific, they rode together. Not for a cause this time, not for a hearing or a protest or a stand, just to ride. The Oregon coast stretched out ahead, wild and breathtaking, cliffs dropping into churning water, seabirds wheeling overhead, the ocean crashing against black rocks in explosions of white foam. The sky burned orange and gold and deep purple, colors so vivid they seemed unreal. Rowan rode behind Cade on the big Harley, arms wrapped around the man who'd become the father he never had. The wind whipped past them, salt-tinged and cold, carrying the smell of seaweed and freedom. Behind them, 22 more engines roared in perfect formation, a symphony of loyalty, justice, and brotherhood. As they rode, Rowan thought about his mom, about the promise she'd made him swear in the hospital room during those final days. "Survive, baby, no matter what. Promise me you'll survive." And he thought about the promise Kate had made 3 years ago in a diner at midnight, with rain streaking the windows and fear thick in the air. "You're not going back. I promise." Both promises had been kept. Rowan closed his eyes for just a moment, feeling the vibration of the engine, the warmth of the setting sun on his face, the solid presence of Cade in front of him. And somewhere in that space between the wind and the thunder, between the roar of engines and the crash of waves, he felt his mother's presence. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as something deeper. A kind of peace that settled into his bones. She was proud. He knew it without doubt. The road curved along the coastline, endless and open. Rowan opened his eyes and smiled. He'd survived. And more than that, he'd learned to live. He'd learned what it meant to be loved unconditionally, to be protected fiercely, to belong to something bigger than himself. The convoy rolled on as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold. Cade glanced back over his shoulder, caught Rowan's eye, and gave a small nod. No words needed, just understanding. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not blood, but chosen, real, unbreakable. And as the last light of day faded into twilight, Rowan felt something he hadn't felt in years, complete and total certainty that no matter what came next, no matter what challenges lay ahead on the long road of healing, he would never ride it alone. 23 engines, one family, one promise kept forever. Thank you for watching this story of courage, loyalty, and chosen family. If these words moved you, please subscribe to hear more Northern Confessions. Stories of real people who choose to stand when the world asks them to kneel. Leave a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. These stories travel far, and we want to know how they reach you. Until the next ride, stay strong, stay true, and remember, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when no one else will. Sometimes it's the strangers who become brothers. Sometimes it's a promise made at midnight that changes everything.